Hey everybody, nice to see so many people today. We are moving on to Premiere Pro, so I'm going to talk at you for a couple of minutes. But while I'm talking, if you want to follow along and have a go at the stuff that I'm doing, I've prepared some resources for you. You need to go to this folder here. So if you open your browser, Chrome or Safari or Edge or whatever you're using, and type in tinyurl.com/Chrissy DM. Doesn't have to be in capitals. And then in there you'll see a screen that has Photoshop sessions, Premiere sessions and so on. We're looking in Premiere sessions and we're downloading the first 3 folders, Premiere 1, Premiere 2 and Premiere 3. Okay, so if you're struggling with that, ping me in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat window. I'm recording this session and I've got some videos for these exercises as well, so you can I'll talk at you and I'll demonstrate, and then I'll give you some videos to have a go with, and you can come back if you've got any questions. It's a bit odd teaching online. Okay, so while you're doing that and Premiere's opening, which may be some time, you'll be pleased to know we're getting new computers. So that will help everything a lot. So Premiere Pro, a few things you should know, and you'll recognise some of this from when we did After Effects. It's the same information really, because they're quite similar. There's some differences, but there are some similarities. So things you should know. Take notes. Use your mobile phone to take photos of the screen when you get something that you need. If you've got an effect or settings or something, use your camera phone. Write notes if you want. But these things, all this software moves so quickly that you need notes to refer to, and I do that all the time. I use these softwares all the time for work, for teaching and so on, and I still have to refer to notes half the time just to remind myself of shortcuts and how to layer up effects and things like that. So take notes. This will be clearer again as we go through, but your project input needs to line up with the output. So the stuff I give you today is already sized, but the stuff you're using yourself, you need to think about what your output is going to be when you start recording. So when you set your inputs, portrait, landscape, whatever else you do, whatever format you're using, whether you're scanning in, doesn't have to be camera, so you need to think about what your output is going to be. So is it going to be big screen? Is it going to be massive and digital? Is it going to be projected? Is it going to be tiny on Instagram? Is it portrait, landscape, square? What is the type of display that you're going to use to show this work? These things are important, so start having that in the back of your mind for your own work. How are you going to show it? We'll move on. We're going to do a couple of weeks of Premiere and then go back to After Effects and then look at some projection mapping, and you'll start to see why it's so important to have this idea of what you're going to show it as, how you're going to show it at the beginning. Okay, so you've seen this slide before, and I've just put it up again to remind us all Premiere is good at video editing. And we're going to start that in a minute and you will see why. It's really good at editing video clips together, cutting them down to the right size and sticking them together. It's not very good at adding effects or text or animations or any of the things we did in After Effects. They're best done in After Effects, so pick the program you're going to use wisely. By the end of the set of sessions, we'll be using both. So we'll be using Premiere and dropping into After Effects and coming back round in a circular sort of pattern, because they each have their own special strengths and they each have things that they're really bad at. So I'll skip through that one and come back to the important stuff. And I will bang on about this every week, because Premiere, After Effects, same as InDesign, they only save the links to your footage. They don't actually save your footage as part of the project. So you need to keep all your footage, your resources, your assets, all those things need to be in a folder as well as your project file. Okay. And when we save, we'll make sure that that happens. but you need that in the back of your mind as well. And back up your work. You know, I always come back to back up your work. Don't be the person at the end of term whose work is gone. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing that and start sharing Premiere Pro. Maybe. There it is. Okay, so you should be able to see my Premiere Pro screen. And I've just loaded something up to start with just to show you the screens, because otherwise it's just a blank space. So I'm going to talk through the workspace, and then we're going to backtrack and we'll set up our own workspace and import media and so on. But same as other Adobe software, if you look at the top, we've got a menu bar with File, Edit, Sequence Markers, Graphics and so on. Under that we've got a second bar that has the workspaces labelled up. I'm in editing, so if yours doesn't look like this, you might have this workspace, or that one, or something else. And we're going to start off in editing. So if you're in the editing workspace, at the top left you've got the source window, and that's showing me whatever image I'm working on at the moment. Silence that. So yeah, that's showing us whatever piece of footage I'm working on. Underneath is the source box, so all the project management happens down here. We can choose what we're going to use and look at our individual clips. On the right hand side we have the timeline monitor, so that is showing us everything that's on our timeline, everything that we've put together. And underneath that we have the actual timeline, placed from left to right, and we'll come back to that. And in the middle, squeezed up there, we've got a toolbar. Okay, so I'm going to clear this, and then I can start a new Premiere Pro document, and we can look at how to import things and so on together. So, just do that. So when you open up Premiere, you'll have this screen to start with. And we're just going to choose New Project. And the first thing we're going to do is choose a place to store all our information to put our project. Premiere and all these programs store stuff in weird places. So if you don't choose carefully in the first place, you might find you can't find your work again. That's quite stressful. So in the New Project folder, I'm going to name my project. And then under that, in the location, I'm going to click on Browse, which is at the end there, and then find my folder with that I downloaded, so Premiere 1 setting up. So I'm going to choose that as my location. And the zoom bar is now hiding all the things at the bottom. Let's make that. So Premiere 1 setting up, and select folder. And everything else I'm just going to ignore. I'm not worried about everything else. So we can go to OK. Yeah, so that's given me the four windows that we had before on the toolbar, but there's nothing in it. So the first thing I'm going to do now is import some footage to play with. If you look to the bottom left, and make sure you're in the editing workspace. So look across the top and check editing's on. And look to the bottom left. You should have a box that says Import Media to Start. If you haven't got that one, you might need to click on this little double arrow and find your project within the list there. But it should already be there. I'm going to double click on that, so double left click. And that will open, hopefully, my folder. My previous version of Premiere took you straight to the folder that you set the project up in, but this version, for some reason, it might be because it's on Windows, it's not doing that. So I've obviously not set that up right. I'm just going to locate my folder wherever it is. There it is. And in the setting up, is it all gone? Right, so I'm going to locate my folder, which is on the desktop. And in there, there's two folders, one with music track in it, and one with video tracks. And there's also my project has started to save there as well. So I'm going to take the music folder, should select the video folder. The zoom bar is covering everything up again. I want to make my zoom bar smaller. There. And I'm just going to open those. Okay, for some reason only one has come in, so I'm going to go back. Get the other one. There it is. Okay, so I've got two folders now. I've got my music folder and my video folder. And I'm going to start with the video. So if I double click on that folder, it will open out my video into a set of, it will show me the various sort of bits, the assets that I've got in that folder. So I've got 4 bits of video track in there. The bottom of that panel, got a choice over how we look at the icons. So we can have a list view, which has got my 4 tracks and all the information that I might possibly need about those. And we're going to ignore that because we don't need any of that. We've got the icon view, which is how it looked when we first imported it. And in that view, I can just mouse over each individual image. And you can see there that I can play through almost. It's just like a little thumbnail video of what the image contains. And the next one is the freeform view. This is really good for storyboarding. So I'm just going to open the freeform view. On your keyboard, and it's going to be difficult because everybody will have a different keyboard. So if you're working on a Mac keyboard, next to the Z key, so Z for zebra, to the left of that you'll have a squiggle. Let me just find the video. There. So I'm just going to hold up an example of a Mac keyboard. And we are looking for this key here next to the Z key. Let's see, looking at this in mirror image because it hasn't flipped. Okay. So it's a squiggle, it's called the tilde key. If you're working on a Windows laptop, it's probably not there. It's probably under the escape key or next to the number 1 key. So of finding it. So if you get stuck, ping me in the chat and we will find that. Okay. So anyway, once you've got that key, you can press it and it will blow up whatever part of the screen you're looking at the time. Because I'm in storyboard view, I can drag my clips around now and just start thinking about where I'm going to put them. That is really handy because it means you can get everything ready. You can think about the order that stuff's going in, and you don't have to spend any time at this stage editing or doing anything nicely. It's just like rough dragging, vague sort of storyboarding, deciding what's going to go where. If you've got a lot of footage, that's a very quick way to work. Then I can press that key just to shrink it again. So I'm going to start with a clip. I'm going to start with this number 2. I'm just going to double click on it and it will come up in the source window. So the source window is where we take an individual clip and we make changes to it or add to it or take away from it. So we can make some very basic changes. We can edit the beginning and the end off. So if we look at the source window, see the clip is in the middle. At the bottom we've got some blue writing which tells us where the playhead is. The playhead is this little blue clip. So as I drag that across, it changes where we are in the blue writing. Next to that we've got a button that says fit, and I can scale up and down in there. I'm just going to keep it in fit. Next to that we've got two icons that we will come back to. Then we've got the half, full and quarter icons. So if your computer is having a lot of problems playing anything, you can drop the resolution down to half or a quarter, and that will help it a little bit. Won't affect the resolution of what you export, so just what you're looking at. Ignore the spanner, and then we've got the whole length of the clip as in when it's marked off. And so I'm going to grab the blue playhead, and I could play this through. I'm just scrolling through quickly to save some time. I'm going to choose where I want to mark my clip in and where I want to mark it out. So I've got an in-out point. So I'm going to start here and use this bracket down here, which is mark in, or I on the keyboard will mark it in. And then scroll along till I find my out point. I want to mark it out here. I'm going to choose the mark out marker, or O on the keyboard. So that's my first clip. It will play from this point here to this point here, so quite a bit shorter. So now I want to add this to my timeline because I'm going to start putting my clips together so I've got something proper to watch. So I mentioned these two icons underneath the source window image. One is video and one is audio. So I can drag the video or the audio or both from my clip down. This clip doesn't have any audio, so I can only drag the video. I'm going to left click on that button and drag down onto the timeline. So I left clicked and dragged. Okay, so that's brought my piece of footage up in the timeline. Here it is, I can play it through. Looks the same as the source window, but it isn't because this will play everything in the timeline. I can change the way I'm looking at this using, just move the zoom bar, using these tiny toggles at the bottom here. So if I stretch them out, it gives me more workspace. If I push them back in, it gives me less workspace. But they're not affecting the actual clip, only how I'm looking at it. And at the side here, I've got two toggles that can be used to stretch the video up. And again, that's me changing how I'm looking at it, so the top to bottom look. Okay, so I've got my first clip in. I'm going to come back to my source page. There. I didn't switch back to icon view. And choose the next clip that I want. So I'm going to have this. Just move the zoom bar again. Okay, so this clip, again, do the same thing. I'm going to choose where I'm going to start it. So maybe here. Mark it in. Then I'm going to move along. Choose where I'm going to finish it. And so it's called topping and tailing in the industry because you take off the top and you take off the tail. And mark that out. Grab the video drag button and drag it onto the timeline. If I drag it onto the first clip, it will overwrite. I don't want to do that. I want to add it onto the end. So I'm just going to drag it onto the end there. So that gives me my first clip and my second clip. Okay. So I'm going to do that with my third clip. So the first bit of this is a black and white mask. We haven't done those yet, so you can use that or cut it off. It's up to you. I'm going to start there. just going to have a really little bit here. And left click and drag it on. And where's my fourth one? Sorry. Mark it in. Mark it out. Get the video button and drag it onto my timeline. Yes, I've got all 4 clips now. But at the moment I've got what we could call a really hard transition. One clip ends really abruptly and the next one starts. And sometimes there's a place for using that in your films, but usually you'd want some sort of slightly softer transition, so one clip becomes another clip. And that hard kind of chopping is not really what we'd use. So we're going to use transition effects. If I come up to the top panel there and choose effects, it will take me into a different window. So my workspace has changed. Now I've got everything that I did have, plus I've got an effect controls panel up here. My source panel is still there, but my effect controls is the one I'm using. I'm going to look in the effects boxes and find video transitions. So we've got lots of things going on in here. There are loads of video effects. They're not very good. We try not to use them. The colour ones are okay, but everything else is a bit shabby. A bit like using PowerPoint page wipes and things. Nobody really uses them. But there's some video transitions that we're going to use. So I would use After Effects for effects, but video transitions we can use from Premiere. And we're just going to use a basic dissolve. So I've dropped down dissolve. Here's cross dissolve, so that's what we want. And if I left click it, I can just drag it on to the join between my clips. I know that's quite hard to see. It's the green spot on my timeline. So you can see there, that tiny thing looks like a piece of tape on my timeline. Let me just move the zoom up. And that's my cross dissolve icon. So if I click on that, it comes up in the effect controls panel. And I can see exactly what I've got there now. So I can slide my effect backwards and forwards if I want to. But more importantly, I can stretch it out so it lasts for longer. If I hover over it and get the red arrow, I can make the cross dissolve really long or really short. So it's just a much nicer blend than what we had before. Or I can squeeze it up on the timeline if I want. So there's different ways of getting to the same sort of effect. Okay, so I'm happy with that one. I'm just going to move on and repeat another cross dissolve at the next junction and one at the final junction. And then just check that I'm happy with the length. Okay. So people that are following along, are you okay keeping up, or do you want me to go through anything again at this point? Speak to me using your voice, or you can put a message in the chat if that helps. Thank you. Fab. Okay, anyone's not okay? Anybody want me to go back over something so far? Okay, I've worked out how to see the chat all the time, so I can. So if you ping in that, I'll be able to see that you've messaged me. Okay, so that is my video so far with the transitions on it. And I'm going to do one last thing to this before I add some audio, which is, at the moment it just finishes really harshly, just goes black. So if I go back to the transitions, I can choose dip to black or dip to white, and that will just fade it out nicely. So I'm going to choose dip to black and drag that onto the end. The same as the others, I can select it and extend it so that it's so that I have a longer fade. And it just looks nice, it makes it a bit more finished. Okay, so next I'm going to come back to my project manager and use the little arrow folder icon thing, which is very hard to see, and just step up and find a folder called music. And you'll notice there's an extra thing appeared in this panel now, so as well as my video I've got a new thing, and that is my sequence. So that is just what's going on here is in here. And that's there in case I want to use it in another sequence, so I can just sort of stack the sequences into each other. So I'm going to go into the music folder, and if I double click on the music object, that will come up in the source window. So if you have done anything with music sound waves before, you'll understand what's going on here. We'll look at sound waves and music more closely in a couple of weeks, so I'm not going to talk you through it. I'm just going to tell you that this music track is roughly the right size to use, and we're going to cut a little bit off, but we're not going to do any editing to it. So we can add it to our timeline using the audio gadget icon at the bottom there. So I can left click and drag it onto the audio track. The audio is always underneath the video, so the audio tracks will head downwards and the videos will stack upwards. Okay, so at the moment it's a bit long, and I want to finish both of my things at the same time, so I'm just going to cut the end off. And again, we could go into some sort of complex audio editing, but we're not going to. We're just going to find the end of our project. I'm going to get the razor tool from the toolbar, which is shortcut C on the keyboard, the razor tool, and that means I can cut cleanly off at the end there. I can get the arrow key, so V on the keyboard, select that end bit, and delete on the keyboard will get rid of it. So at the moment I've got quite a harsh edge there, so I'm going to look back in my transitions. This time I want the audio transitions. There aren't many in audio transitions, there's only crossfade really. And we want the exponential fade, so that will just fade away slowly to infinity. I'm just going to drag that on. If I want to, it's gone behind the zoom bar again. If I want to change the length of the fade so I have a bit more, I can come back into the effect controls. And just edit it or edit it up here. Okay, so my video and my music end at the same time, so I'm happy with that. I could play it through, but I'm not going to. I'm going to export it as a little video, so I've got an actual thing. So with the timeline selected, so I've got the blue outline around it. I'm going to go to File, Export, Media. And unlike After Effects, Premiere has its own exporter, so you don't have to fiddle around. You don't have to open up another program. You can just do it straight in here. Just make that a little smaller so I can keep thinking. Okay, so that will open up another window. So at the bottom of this window we've got a blue line, and that shows my timeline from beginning to end, and I can drag the marker up and down. So I'm going to put the marker at the beginning. I'm just going to check that I actually have a project here. Sometimes when you load up it's only got one frame. So if your number here is only 1, then you haven't exported your project properly. You need to have it will be the duration of the whole file, but any number in there will probably be right. So I've got my project, got the blue line all the way along. I'm going to come up to the export settings, and this looks more horrible than it is. There's very little in here that we really need to do anything with. So under Format, I click the little arrow and find H.264. Yours might have that already. If you're Windows, it will probably just keep resetting to Abbey. So my format is H.264. It will deal with everything else for me. H.264 is just a coding sort of compression thing that will give us the best output for the smallest file size, and you can use it on YouTube, you can use it on the TV, plug it into screens, show it on the projector. Put it on Instagram, H.264 will do, and put it on the web, do all those things. So that's the format we're going to use. The next thing we're going to do is find the words output name, and there'll be some blue writing next to it. I want you to click on the blue writing, and that should take you back to your folder, but obviously in my case it's refusing to do that, and I haven't worked out why. So I'm going to find my folder, and I'm going to choose where I'm going to put my video. So I'm going to call it, I don't know, video. And save it as whatever it comes up with. It will do that for you. And save. So I've changed my output, which I did give a new name to, but it doesn't seem to. Oh, it's maybe a new folder. Okay, so I've changed my output, and now I can just go down to the bottom and hit export. Okay, so that should have exported, so let's go and have a look. Just show the whole screen. Okay, so you should be able to see my whole desktop here. Here's my folder. If I open it, so icon view, I've got a few things going on in here. I've got my music folder with music in it. Got my video folder that's got my video clips in. I see what I did now. I saved my video into the video folder, badly labelled. Okay, I've got my exported video here. I won't play it all through because you'll be sick of hearing it. Got my project file. The thing I really wanted to draw your attention to is this, the Premiere Pro autosave folder. So Premiere Pro knows, it's like After Effects, it knows it's not very good, it knows it crashes a lot, knows it can't handle things. So every so many minutes, I think it's 10 or 12 minutes, it saves a version of what you're doing. And that's really handy because it means that when it crashes, which it will, you can just step back sort of 10 minutes to the previous version. You can find it in the autosave, double click on it, and it will open and relink all your stuff from a few minutes ago. So you're never more than 10 minutes-ish away from where you need to be. So that will just put itself in its own folder, and it should automatically put it in your project folder. So if you're on a Mac, it definitely will. If you're on Windows, it seems to do something a bit weird, so I'll have to work that out and come back to you. Okay. Let's come back to Premiere. Okay, so that's my first video made and exported. I'm going to close this project, so File, Close Project. Let me save my changes. I'm going to make a new project. This time I'm going to browse my folders and find folder 2, which is called Keyframes. Check that. Give it a name. Go to OK. So that's taken me back to this workspace. I'm just going to change back to editing so I get more room. So I clicked on editing on the top there. And I want to import my media. So in my project box, I'm going to double click. And it's still taking me to the old project. Hopefully yours will take you to a new project. And I'm going to open the project, and in there's a folder called Assets, and you'll probably remember these from After Effects. If you did the After Effects session, you will have come across these. I've just selected both of them and open. So these are, we're just going to use it as an introduction to keyframes. So we're going to do what we did with After Effects, but it's going to look slightly different because things are in a different place and don't always work quite the same way. So you'll be able to see the difference as we go along. So my first clip is this background. I'm going to drag that straight onto the timeline because I don't need to make any changes to it. It's a still image. It will automatically come in at 5 seconds. I could shorten it or lengthen it if I wanted. So there's my still image. Nothing happens when I play it because it's just an image file. And then I'm going to get my rocket and I'm going to drag that in over the top. Now, I need to do it in that order because whichever thing I put on first on the timeline, Premiere will match all the settings to that. So if I put the rocket first, the rocket's a square image, so it will give me some weird square place to work on, whereas the background is the right size. It's 1080p, it's the right size for the project. Okay, so background first, rocket on top. And then I'm going to come back up and go to the Effect Controls panel, so top left. So all the keyframing stuff, just selected the rocket there, all the scale, all the information that in After Effects we found on the timeline. In Premiere, it's up here on the top left, Effect Controls. It's easier to keyframe in After Effects, really, because you're working in time. You locate the point on your timeline and you add the keyframes. And if you remember, you can see them come up underneath, so you know exactly where they are. Can't do that in After Effects, in Premiere. You have to do it all here. So if you look in your effect controls, make sure your rocket's selected. You might need to drop down this tiny arrow next to motion, and you can see the parameters or the numbers for motion, position, scale, rotation, and so on. We're going to look at scale first. So if I look at the blue numbers, remember in After Effects we could scrub over that by holding down a left mouse button and then dragging the mouse up and down, left and right. We can use that to rescale very quickly, so we're going to use that to scale it down. And then we're going to click on the word position. And we can position our rocket where we want. So I'm going to start mine at the bottom left corner there. Okay, so I've chosen my starting position and my starting scale. Now I'm going to tell Premiere that's what I want. So at this position on the timeline, so either here in a timeline, or this is the same thing in Effect Controls. At this position, 0 frames, I want, in the timeline, I want the physical position of the rocket to be here in the bottom left, and a scale of -22. So I'm going to click on the stopwatch icon for position and scale. That's automatically put a keyframe in for both of those at the beginning there for me. Then I'm going to move along the timeline to about halfway. Click on the word position, so select the word position, and drag my rocket to its new position. So halfway along my timeline, I want it to be up here. And that's automatically keyframed the position in there for me as well. I might want to scale it up or down a little bit so it looks like it's got closer or nearer, so I could do that there as well. There. And then I'm going to move to the end of the timeline, close to the end. If you go right to the end, it will go black, so near the end. And I'm just going to move my rocket again. I might go even smaller. So I've just changed the scale as well. Okay, so when I play it through, it will match to the keyframes. Okay. Looks pretty awful, it's really juddery, but my laptop is, as you know, not coping very well, so that's, it doesn't look too good. So the only other thing I want to do really is deal with the rotation of the rocket. So at the moment it's just doing a weird thing. And there's lots of different ways I could do this, but the simplest way, and the way we're going to use, is to use rotation. So at the beginning of my scene, I want the rotation to, I want the rocket to point up the path. So if I look at rotation, I can turn on the rotation and just sort of get it to the right point. I come up to the middle, I can start rotating it. I come to the end, I can rotate it the rest of the way. Okay. So everything you do, you need to find the frame first. So find the point on the timeline first, and then tell it where to be and what to do. So always point first, action after. Okay, everyone okay so far? Give me a thumbs up or a I'm okay if you feel like you're hanging in there. Or ask a question if you don't. You are so quiet. Okay, are you ready for me to move on, people, or do you want another few minutes there? It's vanished. Okay, so I'm going to export this. I'm going to click so that it's got the blue border around it. Go to File, Export, Media. Check everything's there on the timeline, all 5 seconds of it. Check my format is H.264. Click on the blue writing and look to see where it's going, and yet again it's not going to where I want it to. And give it a name if you want to. And save. And then export. So I'm going to have a look in my folder. I have my assets, which was my 2 bits of image, my project itself. I haven't got a save file because I've done it too quickly. I think it must have come in under 10 minutes or whatever. There's my video. Okay. So, unless someone stops me, I'm going to assume that you're all still okay. So I'm going to close this project because I don't want it anymore. So File, Close Project. I don't want to save it, but I could. And I'm going to make a new project. And in the browse, I'm going to find my folders and choose number 3 for video effects. And select that and choose OK. And I'm just going to go back to my original version. So the source window, my program, my timeline, and my project manager. I'm going to double click on the project manager, find my new folder. It should have found for me. And in there, ignore the assets, but in there there's a folder called footage. And there are 4 pieces of footage in there. You select them all and open them. Okay, so I've got 4 pieces. So what we're going to do with this is stack them up and then animate them so that they all move around into place. So I will demonstrate the first one and I'll go back over it again more slowly. So this is my first clip. It's got video and audio attached, and I don't really want the audio because if I stack up the audio from all 4 of them, it's going to sound a bit horrible. I'm just going to grab the video and drag it straight onto the timeline. There it is. I'm going to go to Effect Controls, select my clip, and I'm going to animate the scale so that it shrinks and the position so that it moves. So I'm going to start with it full size where it is, so toggle on position and scale. By the end of the clip, I want it to be 1/4 of the size and up in one of the corners. So I know that for that the scale has to be 50%, so I'm just going to type that right in. And if I select position, I can just move it into position. There are grids and guides and things we can use, but I'm not going to use them for this. Okay, so that's the first one done. Come back to the beginning, get another one, get the video and drag this on top, so the next layer up. If I drag it literally on top of my first clip, it will overwrite it. So I want to drag it into the next layer. Select it, go to Effect Controls, toggle on position and scale, move to the end of the clip, rescale it to 50%, select the position, and position it. Get the next one. Get the video, drag it on top, select it, go to Effect Controls, turn on the position and the scale, move to the end of the clip, drop the scale down to 50, and move the position to wherever I want it to be. Okay, last clip. Get the video, drag it in, select it, go back to the Effect Controls, change the timeline, toggle the position and the scale, come to the end of the timeline, drop the scale, select position and reposition it. So that gives you quite a nice keyframe scale and position effect that you'd see in a music video. In fact, I know you'd see it in a music video because they did exactly that with these clips. Okay, so when you've got that far, same thing again, select the blue line, File, Export, Media. Check it's all there. I usually put the timeline marker back to 0 because that will give me this as the thumbnail image, the first image. H.264. Find an output folder. I really need to sort out why this isn't doing it. Give it a name and save, and then export. Okay, so while I've got this footage up, I'm just going to show you rather than ask you to do this. I'm going to look in more depth at it later on. But I've said a few times that effects in Premiere aren't very good. Okay, so I'm going to use this clip here. And just get the effects window. There we go. And so we've used the video transitions. So transitions you use whenever you're sticking two clips together. That's a transition. Things that you apply to a clip are video effects. So in here we've got, let's try noise and grain. I'm just going to drag that onto my clip. And all the parameters, all the numbers and stuff for that will come up in Effect Controls. And I can play it through. I can up the amount of noise. You can see the effect there, probably, and it's not very clear and I'm on quite low resolution. But you should be able to see that there's some effect there. And if I have it quite low down, but not too bad, you can see the ripples and the bits that are meant to look like vintage film. And it's just not very realistic. It doesn't look very good. It's digital effect. And actually, there's a place for analog effects. You know, there's in the real world. My dad's a sound engineer and has been, well, he's not now, but he was for all his life. And he, even when they started moving to digital stuff, they would run things back off onto analog tape to get that warmth effect that you only get with non-digital things. So digital stuff is too perfect. If it's done by maths, and all this is, it's always going to be too regimented and too perfect. And a lot of people don't like digital photography and digital film because of that. But you can sort of cheat the system a bit by putting real stuff back in. So in my project, in one of those things. I had an asset called Overlay Dust and Scratches. I'm going to get rid of the noise that I added and add the dust and scratches, and you can see that's just it's a piece of analog footage, and it is just much more irregular to look at. And I can blend that on with, which help if I had applied the blend to the right thing, wouldn't it? So, same as you would in Photoshop, I can just blend that on screen. Is probably good. And you get a much nicer effect. It's very natural. And there's loads of stock footage like that out there, or you could make your own or whatever. After Effects are a bit better, but there is nothing better really than having a mix of digital and analog stuff going on. It's definitely a place for both. There's my zoom. Okay, so I'm going to finish there, because that's the same point as I got up to with Group 1 this morning. Has anyone got any questions? Is there anything you want me to go over again?